guys know what it is. We're back at the build. Today I got to do a couple things today. Of course, that's redundant. So here's the deal. I have to go ahead and start chopping the frame, which means that we got to work on the hardtail. That means that I need to set up my tube bender and a drill press. I'm not really going to focus on that too much. Setting up the tube bender is kind of a pain in the ass, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and then we can go ahead and start chopping the frame and taking some measurements and figuring out what type of bends we're going to need. I've got two different kinds of tube. I have 1 1/8 and 1 1/4 DOM tubing, which is what they use for motorcycle frames. With a .120 wall, it's what a lot of people use for motorcycle frames, and surprisingly enough, I've been talking to TJ Brutal Customs, who specializes in Honda Shadow builds like this. He was recommended by a lot of you guys. Both him and I talked back and forth for a good bit, and we were both kind of blown away by how many people knew me and knew him at the same time. It was like a weird correlation, and so we're going to be using some of his parts for this build, like the carburetor kit, I believe, an exhaust, and a rear fender. So we're gonna get those shipped out ASAP and start throwing them on the bike. So that was really cool. That was really cool, you guys who know TJ. If you guys don't know TJ, I've posted links to all of his stuff below. He's got a lot of information, a lot of helpful tips and tricks when building shadows like this. He even has a weld-on hardtail kit for these. I'm not gonna use that. I kind of want to do it myself, but if I fuck it up, I'll just use his. We also got a few new parts, and like all the hand controls came back from powder coating too, so we'll kind of throw those on today just kind of get a good idea. So we're gonna chop the frame and hopefully weld up the hardtail today. After that's good, I'll take off the front and rear wheels and send those off for powder coating, and maybe even rip the engine out if I can, because I want to black out part of that engine. There's a lot of silver. Actually, I think I want to do a lot of the engine in black, but we'll see. You know, it's kind of like one of those make your own kind of deals. Maybe even weld up the seat today. So those are the things that I want to do, and there's nothing to do it but to do it.
My chest hurting, the flesh in my flesh burning, I'm stressed, but I don't stress it unless it affects person. I care about the other.
Just as a heads up, you need a hammer drill to do this kind of shit. I don't have a hammer drill, so we're just winging it.
Once smoking with a punctured lung, walking to the classroom and zone until the function's done. College student, but my goals ain't studious. Daydreaming back in the class, I bang gluteus. Payroll.
That took entirely way too long, but it'll work for today. Yeah, it'll work. Alright, so funny story. You guys know how I said I was going to take a piece of square steel and just connect here to here in the meantime so I could get a rigid axle so that way it wouldn't flex or anything like that? Well, I actually have a bunch of spare parts from other motorcycles that I can kind of pick and choose from and borrow. And I was looking for just a piece of steel to like drill holes in to put in between there, and I found this. This is an FZ8 OEM link, like a this is like for the suspension to set your height. So this is factory, and it fits perfectly at this height, which is the height that I want. So like I just literally just happen to have this laying around, so I'm just gonna insert this in there. Look at it. That's ridiculous. It fits perfect. Like at the exact height that I need it to be at, it just fits absolutely perfect. That is some funny shit. So now I can just chop it. I can chop, I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna chop here on both sides and chop here about 3 inches up. At least that's what TJ suggested here. And then see if I can't connect the two motherfuckers. Alright, this is where things get interesting. So, one of the biggest issues that I had was that there was no solid measurements online about this, so I could go ahead and pre-order the tubing. So, since I'm here now, I can give everybody the measurements so you can plan accordingly. The outer diameter of the subframe, or the swing arm, whatever you want to call this, using my calipers, it's 1.35 inches. The inner diameter of this is somewhere around 1.8 1.17 inches. The wall thickness is about 0.075 or 0.08, somewhere around there. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is different inner and outer diameter. The outer diameter of this tubing up here, about 1.40, and the inner diameter, 0.75 for the wall thickness. What does that mean? This is wider than this, but that doesn't really matter, believe it or not. That doesn't really matter that much. I also asked TJ what size tubing he uses. He uses for his weld on hardtails, he uses 1 1/8 inch tubing. That's a pretty snug fit. However, I know that up here it's a little bit more loose. You got a little bit more of a gap. It shouldn't pose too much of an issue, especially if we do some plug welds. That should really hold this thing in place. So I'm not concerned about the minor gap in between. I've looked online and a lot of people, they have no issues with this. We just need to make sure that our beads are extra clean and that our plug welds are extra strong. So here's the plan. I'm gonna cut this here, right at the end of the bend here, cut this bend off, and then figure out what angle bend I need using a specific tool. And when it comes to measuring tubes and bending and cutting, angles can get tricky. So what's really handy is that I have this little whoopsie-doody thing here. I don't know what to say, angle cube, I guess. But basically it helps me find angles and whatnot. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna zero this out here. We're gonna put it here. We have about 12 degrees. So that means that there's a 12-degree difference between here and here. One might think that means we need to bend a 12-degree bend in the tube, and you would be wrong. And that's why it's important to do the simple maths. Now, like I said before, TJ Brutal Customs has a pre-tube bent, like a pre-bent weld-on kit. We're not using that. I just like to, I want to get the use out of this. Woodward Fab sent me out this for my last build, and I would feel bad buying a pre-bent tube kit if I have a tube bender. Tube bending from the beginning seems really sketchy. It seems it's a large learning curve because there's math involved, and you have to be kind of like not stupid to do it, which is hard because I'm very stupid and it makes it hard for me. Like I said, at first glance, tube bending seems really complicated, especially with all this mechanical tube bending and dies. To begin, it's not a cheap setup. I think the tube bender itself is like a couple $100 plus each die is around $200. I mean, it's certainly cheaper than hydraulic ones. And then you have to mount this to the floor, and some people don't like drilling into their concrete or whatever you mount it to. But I promise it's really not as crazy or terrifying as it looks. You have these dies where the tube fits in. You have this collar that keeps it in place. This bolt, you tighten it down to keep the tube from moving when you bend it. And here's the tricky part, this is where a lot of people mess up, is that you want absolute zero. So right now looking at it, the tube is in the device you want to start bending. Well, so you zero it out and you get to bending, and look, now we're already at 5 degrees. Well, I didn't bend the tube 5 degrees. That's because it's not actually zeroed. What you want is to put tension. You want to put it's called preloading your tube bender and then zero it out, so you get an absolute zero. So if we look there, now we're at 0. We have all the tension, we can start our bend. I'm gonna bend at 25 degrees. Okay. Now this does take some work. This is not for the weak. This does take a little bit of strength here. All right, so now look, we're at 25 degrees and I still have tension on the tube bender. But watch what happens when I let go of that tension. We're not actually at 25 degrees. That's because metal has an elastic, especially cold rolled steel, has an elastic property to it, meaning that you need to go past. So we're actually gonna go a little bit past 25 degrees worth of bend. Let me let off the tension. Not quite there yet. Tension needs to be a little bit more. Perfectly at 25 degrees. Now that there's tension let off, and we can now pull our tubing out. We have a perfect 25 degree bend. No kinks, nothing. This is known as a mandrel bend, and that's why tube benders are so important. So now we have two perfectly cut, same length, same bend. I did it off camera, but we've got 2 of them. They'll fit perfectly in here. But here's the problem. No, now they don't line up. What am I to do now? Oh my goodness, I totally screwed up. They don't line up. What am I ever gonna do? I'm just kidding. I knew that was gonna happen because now we have to take the suspension link out, lift it, then slip them in, and then it should close back up together. Yeah, Bobs, yeah. Heck yes. Now these are in there kind of loosely. They can be adjusted a little bit. I'll make sure they're nice and even before I start welding them up in a little bit. Here's what's next. So, yeah. I need to remove the dog bone. So just to be exact, these are bent at about 24.9 degrees, 25 degrees worth of bend. If you guys want to follow along, that's what I bent these at. I left about 4 inches down here so I could have plenty of room to plug and have extra support. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna pull the tubes out that I've just installed. I'm going to cut this along here and see if I believe that this tube will match up with this down here. So I'll weld up a support here to here. I shouldn't even have to bend anything. It looks like it lines up pretty freaking sweet as is. So that should just be like a little collar. I'll also weld a support that probably in between here. This looks good for me. So what a plug weld is, essentially is I'm gonna drill a hole here and probably here, and it'll expose this tubing inside this tubing, and then you just weld the gap shut, so it's just an extra anchor point. We'll do that there, and there as well. Then, once the hardtail is 100% in place, I can cut off this middle bracket for support, and then I can weld up where I want my seat to go. So yeah, back to work. Alright, this is it, folks. This is full commit time. I've got the welder set up. I'm going to pull it over here and we're just going to kind of tack it in place, see how we like it. Oh shit. Fucking mask isn't dimming. I went to weld and I hit a bead real quick and I was like, huh, why do my eyes hurt?
Plus this.
Alright, I'm calling it for the day. I tapered the welds down there, and then I got these all full. So, I had hoped to take that front wheel off, but I need a really big Allen key for that. I don't have, so I'm gonna run out and get one of those, but not today. Whew, I'm beat. I had hoped to get a little bit more done. I'd hoped to actually maybe even get the engine pulled out today. It's just not gonna happen. My head hurts. Well, I'm thinking about it though. Check this out. Here's all the hand controls that come back from powder coat. Just absolutely beautiful. The tank and the front fender should be done next week when we start wrapping things up. All we have left to do now is I gotta make 1 or 2 more cuts, a couple more support welds, wait for that rear fender to get in. Once that rear fender gets in, I'll weld the rear fender up, and then we'll break it all back down, send the frame out and the engine out for painting and powder coating, and that's it, dude. Then we reassemble. So probably like 2 more episodes, and then we'll be done. But hardtail's on, man. Pretty happy about that. I just hit the back with the grinder a little bit just to taper it down so it looks a little bit more smooth. I am gross and I'm beat, y'all. This is it. Our tires came in though. Our white walls. Gonna strip these off, make them nice and white. The blue is protectant, but all right, guys, I'm done.